Evelyn's world shattered with the flick of a card. The saloon's smoky air clung to her dress, the sharp tang of whiskey and sweat mixing with the faint scent of her lavender soap. One small piece of dignity she still clung to. Outside, the wind howled across the dusty street, but inside, every sound was swallowed by the moment her husband slammed his hand on the table. "Full house," he crowed, his lips curling in triumph. Then he said the words that froze her blood. "She's yours, Chief, fair and square." The laughter from the table was low and mean, the kind of sound men make when the stakes aren't theirs to carry. Evelyn's husband, Tom Briggs, had been losing all night, first the cattle, then the horse, and now her. It wasn't the first time he'd gambled away their money, but this was something different. The tall man across from him didn't join in the laughter. He was a native warrior, broad-shouldered and straight-backed, his long black hair tied with strips of deer hide. His eyes dark as obsidian held no mockery, only an unreadable depth that made Evelyn's breath hitch. He stood slowly, towering over the table, and with a voice deep enough to carry through the hushed room, he said, "I will take her." "Not as you mean." Every man in the saloon went quiet. Even Tom stopped grinning, blinking as if he'd misheard. "What the hell does that mean?" He barked out. The warrior's gaze never left Evelyn. "It means she will walk free beside me, not chained to the shame you've given her. You lost a life tonight, Briggs, not property." His words were not loud, yet they struck with the force of a hammer. Evelyn felt every eye on her, heat rising in her cheeks as her husband's jaw worked. For years, Tom had treated her like a shadow in his life, something to push aside or pull close depending on his temper. Now, with the cards deciding her fate, she saw no outrage in his eyes, only calculation. "She's yours," he spat. "Just get her out of my sight." The warrior stepped around the table, his boots silent against the warped floorboards. When he reached her, he extended a hand, not in command, but in invitation. His palm was broad, calloused, the skin darkened by sun and wind. Evelyn's heart hammered. Leaving with him meant stepping into a world she didn't understand. Staying meant rotting in the one she already knew. She placed her hand in his. Saloon exhaled low murmurs, shifting boots, the scrape of chairs. Evelyn caught the scent of cedar and smoke from his buckskin shirt as he guided her to the door. The night air was cold, sharp enough to sting her cheeks. She heard the warrior speak quietly in his own language to a man waiting outside with horses. The words were fluid, like river water over stone. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice unsteady. He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw a trace of something softer in his gaze. "Home," he said. Then, after a pause, "You are the spirit of my people now." The words made no sense, yet they stirred something deep in her, an ember she thought had long since died. Behind them, the saloon door slammed. Evelyn didn't look back. The cold night air bit at Evelyn's skin, but she hardly noticed. Every sound seemed sharper now, the creak of the saloon door as it swung shut behind them, the distant whine of the wind threading through the eaves, the muted clink of a horse's bridle. Her mind was still trying to catch up with what had just happened. The warrior led her to horses waiting in the shadows. The man holding the reins was younger, maybe in his 20s, with a braid hanging over one shoulder. He glanced at Evelyn only briefly before handing the warrior a dark-coated stallion. A painted mare stood beside it, her eyes large and watchful. The warrior turned to her. "Ride," he said simply, nodding toward the mare. "I don't know where," she began, but stopped. His expression was unreadable, yet not unkind. He wasn't going to explain more, not yet. Evelyn gathered her skirts and placed a foot in the stirrup. The warrior's hand was there instantly, steadying her as she swung into the saddle. His grip was firm, warm against her cold skin. Without another word, he mounted his stallion and urged it forward. The younger man followed, falling in behind her like a silent shadow. They rode through the sleeping town, hooves muffled by the dust. Dim lanterns glowed in a few windows, but no one stepped outside. Evelyn knew how it must look Tom breaks, wife riding out into the night with a native warrior. The rumors would spread before morning. The open plains swallowed them quickly, the town's lights vanishing behind a low ridge. The moon hung low, silvering the grass and casting long shadows. The air smelled of sage and the faint tang of wood smoke from distant camps. Evelyn's hands tightened on the reins. "You didn't have to take me," she said finally, her voice carrying across the space between them. "I did," he replied without looking back. "Why?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, because no woman should be gambled away, and because my people have need of you. The words unsettled her more than comforted her. Need of me? You don't even know me. Now he turned, his profile carved in silver by the moonlight. I know enough. I saw the way you looked at him like a caged bird watching the door open. That is all I needed to know. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold wind. He wasn't wrong. Life with Tom had been a slow suffocation. But to trade one unknown for another, she didn't yet know if she'd been freed or taken prisoner under a gentler hand. Hours passed, in silence except for the rhythm of the horses. The landscape changed. Rolling hills gave way to a valley where the sound of running water reached her ears. The air was colder here, scented with pine. Finally, the warrior slowed his stallion and signaled for her to follow him down a narrow trail flanked by dark trees. They came to a wide clearing, lit by the dying glow of a campfire. Figures moved in the shadows, men, women, children. A few dogs padded forward, sniffing at the horses before trotting back. The warrior dismounted and held out his hand again. Evelyn hesitated before taking it. His touch was steady, grounding. "This is my home," he said. "You will be safe here." The younger man approached with a bundle wrapped in deer hide. He handed it to the warrior, who opened it and drew out a cloak of soft tanned leather lined with fur. He draped it over Evelyn's shoulders. "The night is cold," he said. "Keep this." The gesture startled her. No man had ever offered her warmth without expecting something in return. She pulled the cloak tighter, breathing in the scent of smoke and wild earth. The warrior stepped closer, his voice low so only she could hear. "Tomorrow you will learn why I called you the spirit of my people." And with that, he walked away into the shadows, leaving Evelyn standing in the clearing. The firelight dancing over her face, her heart caught between fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. Evelyn awoke to the smell of wood smoke and the sound of distant voices. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The soft fur lining of the deer-hide cloak was still around her shoulders, warm from her own body heat. She pushed herself up and blinked against the pale light of dawn spilling through the trees. The camp was stirring. Women carried baskets to a fire pit where a pot steamed over the flames. Children darted between the lodges, laughing, their breath puffing in the cold air. Dogs trotted after them, tails wagging. The sight was so different from the grim saloon nights and the dusty mornings with Tom that Evelyn felt a strange ache in her chest. She noticed the warrior standing a few paces away, speaking in low tones to an elder with long gray braids. Even here, among his own people, he stood out not just for his height or the rippling strength in his frame, but for the quiet authority in his movements. When he turned toward her, the elder's eyes followed. Evelyn felt herself being studied, not in the way a man in town might look at her, sizing her up for what she could offer, but in the way one might study a rare and precious thing. The warrior approached, the frost crunching under his moccasins. "Come," he said, motioning toward the fire. She followed, still clutching the cloak around her. Women stepped aside to make room. offering her a flat cake of bread and a cup of something hot and fragrant. Evelyn hesitated before tasting it. It was rich and earthy, with a sweetness that lingered on her tongue. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. "My people's winter camp," the warrior replied. "We stay here until the snows pass." She looked around again. "You said last night you called me the spirit of your people." "Why?" The corner of his mouth lifted, though it wasn't quite a smile. "It is not for me alone to answer. There are those who believe your coming was foretold." Evelyn blinked at him. "Foretold? I think you've mistaken me for someone else." "I'm not—" "You are exactly who you are meant to be," he interrupted, his tone calm but certain. "You will see." Before she could press him further, a group of children approached, their eyes wide with curiosity. One small girl reached out and touched Evelyn's hair, giggling when it slipped through her fingers. Another offered her a bead strung on a leather cord. Evelyn accepted it awkwardly, unsure of the proper response. But the children beamed at her all the same. The elder with gray braids came to stand beside the warrior. His face was lined with years, his eyes sharp and deep. He spoke in their language, and the warrior translated. "He says there is a strength in you that you do not yet know. And that strength is needed here." Evelyn gave a short, nervous laugh. "I think I'd know if I had any strength worth talking about." The elder shook his head gently, as though she didn't understand her own story yet. Then he handed her a small carved figure, a bird with its wings spread wide. "What is this?" she asked. "A hawk," the warrior said. "It sees farther than others. It carries messages between worlds." Evelyn closed her fingers around the carving, feeling the smooth wood warm in her hand. Something about the way the elder looked at her made her uneasy, yet it wasn't an unpleasant feeling, more like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing there was something incredible below, if only she had the courage to jump. Later, as the sun climbed higher, the warrior showed her where a trail led down to the river. The air there was crisp and alive with the sound of rushing water. He stood beside her, his voice low. "My people will welcome you," he said. "But you must also be ready. Not everyone beyond this camp will wish you well." Evelyn looked at him, a chill prickling along her skin that had nothing to do with the cold. "Why? What am I to them?" His dark eyes held hers. "To some, you will be hope. To others, a threat." She turned back to the river, its silver surface rippling in the morning light. And for the first time since leaving town, she wondered not just where she was, but who she was about to become. The day began with the stillness of deep winter. Frost clung to the branches, and the sky was pale as bleached bone. Evelyn sat near the fire, stringing beads a little girl had given her, when a sound broke the calm 3 sharp whistles from the ridge above camp. The warrior, who had been speaking with the elder, froze mid-sentence. His head lifted, eyes narrowing toward the sound. Without a word, he moved to his horse, his movements quick but controlled. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, rising to her feet. "Scouts," he said, already slinging a bow across his back. "They've seen something." Others in camp moved with quiet urgency, men checking weapons, women gathering children toward the center. Evelyn felt the hair on her arms rise. The mood had shifted from warmth to wary readiness in a heartbeat. Within minutes, 3 riders appeared from the ridge. Their horses were lathered, breath steaming in the cold. One dismounted, speaking rapidly in their language. The warrior's face grew hard. He turned to Evelyn. "There are riders' men from the town, armed. They are following the trail we took." Her stomach dropped. "Tom," she whispered. "He must have—" "Yes," the warrior said, his tone grim. "A man like that will not lose face without striking back." Evelyn's thoughts tangled in panic. "What will they do?" "They will take you," he said, voice low but steady. and they will try to make an example of my people for keeping you." The elder stepped forward, speaking with the weight of authority. The warrior nodded, then looked back at her. "We will not give you to them." The certainty in his voice hit her harder than any threat. No one had ever spoken of her that way, not as a thing to be traded, but as someone worth protecting. He gestured toward a young woman who stood nearby. "Stay with Luda. She will take you to the river trail. If the riders reach the camp, you'll be far from the fight." Evelyn wanted to argue, but the tension in the air told her time was short. Luda's grip was firm on her arm as she led her toward the trees. The sounds of the camp preparing for defense faded behind them, replaced by the rush of the river ahead. The trail was narrow, the ground slick with frost. Evelyn's breath came fast, her heart hammering as they moved deeper into the woods. But then hoofbeats. Close. Too close. Luda shoved her behind a fallen log just as 3 horsemen broke through the trees. Their faces were shadowed under wide-brimmed hats, rifles slung across their backs. Evelyn recognized one instantly, Carl Denton, a friend of Tom's, known for his cruelty and quick temper. "Well, well," Carl said, swinging down from his horse. "Look what the chief's been hiding." Luda stepped in front of Evelyn, her stance unyielding despite being unarmed. "Go back," she said, her accent thick but her English clear. Carl grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Ain't here for you, girl. Hand over the lady and no one gets hurt." Evelyn's chest tightened. She could see the others shifting in their saddles, ready to move. She also knew if she stepped out, Luda might live, but she'd be back in Tom's grip before nightfall. Before she could speak, a deep voice cut through the tension. "You'll ride away now." The warrior emerged from the trees like a shadow given flesh. Shirtless despite the cold, his muscular frame glistened faintly with the mist of the river, his long black hair falling over his shoulders. Tribal jewelry of bone and turquoise caught the pale light. In his hands, a bow was drawn, an arrow aimed square at Carl's chest. Carl's grin faltered. "You wouldn't." The warrior's voice was low, steady. "I would. And you know it." For a moment, no one moved. The wind stirred the branches overhead, a lone hawk crying out somewhere high above. Then Carl spat on the ground, swung into his saddle, and jerked his head toward the others. "We ain't done," he snarled. "Not by a long shot." They turned and rode off, their hoofbeats fading into the forest. The warrior lowered his bow but didn't relax. His gaze found Evelyn's, and she felt the weight of what had just happened settle in her bones. "You're not safe yet," he sighed quietly. "But as long as I breathe, they will not take you." And in that moment, Evelyn realized something that scared her even more than Tom's men. She was beginning to believe him. By the time they returned to camp, the sun was high, but the air still bit with winter's edge. Evelyn could feel the stares. Word had traveled fast, too fast, and every face that turned toward her seemed to be asking the same silent question. Is she worth the trouble? The warrior dismounted in a single fluid motion. "Go to the fire," he told her, his tone softer than his expression. "Warm yourself," but Evelyn didn't move. She was still shaking, not just from the cold, but from the way Carl Denton's eyes had promised something worse than death if they ever met again. The elder with gray braids approached, his gaze calm but penetrating. He spoke in their language, and the warrior replied. The exchange was brief, but Evelyn could sense the weight of it. The elder nodded once, then gestured toward a large lodge at the center of the camp. The warrior looked at her. "They will speak now, the council." She followed him inside. The air in the lodge was heavy with the scent of burning sage. Around the fire pit sat 5 elders, their faces carved by years and wisdom. The warrior sat to her right, his presence a wall between her and the weight of their judgment. One of the elders, A woman with hair like spun silver spoke first. Her voice was soft but carried an authority Evelyn felt in her bones. The warrior translated. "They ask if you understand the danger you bring here." Evelyn swallowed. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Another elder spoke, his tone sharper. "He says the men from your town will come again. More of them, with more guns." She glanced at the warrior. "And if I leave?" The warrior's eyes flicked to her, then back to the elders. He translated their answer. "If you leave, they will still come. But they will not just take you. They will take what they can from us." The truth settled over her like a heavy blanket. It didn't matter where she went. The damage was already done. The silver-haired woman spoke again. The warrior's voice was quieter now as he translated. "She asks if you are willing to stay, not as a burden, but as one of us, to learn our ways, to be the spirit we believe." "You are." Evelyn stared at the fire. The flames danced, bending and shifting, but always reaching upward. She thought of the saloon, the stink of spilled beer and desperation, Tom's voice sharp and mocking. She thought of Carl's rifle, of Luda standing in front of her without fear, and of the hawk carving in her pocket. "I don't know how to be what you think I am," she admitted. The warrior leaned slightly toward her. "No one is born knowing. You learn, you live, you choose." The council waited. Their patience was not the kind of patience Evelyn knew from town. It wasn't a trap, a test to catch her in a wrong word. It was an open door, but one she'd have to step through on her own. Finally, she lifted her chin. "If staying means they don't win, then I'll stay." The warrior translated, and for the first time since she'd entered, a ripple of approval passed through the circle. The silver-haired woman smiled faintly and spoke a few short words. "She says," the warrior told her, "that you have chosen well. Now you will be protected as one of us." When the council dismissed them, the warrior led her outside. The camp felt different now, not because the danger had lessened, but because the people no longer looked at her as a stranger who might bring ruin. Some nodded. A few even smiled. Evelyn pulled the deer-hide cloak tighter. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked toward the horizon, where the dark line of the ridge cut against the pale sky. "Now," he said, "we prepare, because Carl Denton is not a man who accepts defeat." The wind shifted, carrying the distant cry of a hawk. Evelyn felt the carved bird in her pocket and for the first time believed she might have a place in this fight. The next morning broke with a pale gold light spilling over the horizon, the kind that looked soft but carried the promise of heat later in the day. The village was stirring, smoke curling from cooking fires, the low hum of conversation weaving. With the rustle of hides and the clink of clay pots, Lena awoke to the scent of wild sage and fresh earth. She lay on a woven mat inside the warrior's lodge, the walls lined with painted buffalo hides depicting hunts and battles. For a brief, disorienting moment, she forgot where she was until she saw him. He was kneeling by the fire pit, shirtless, the morning light gilding the strong lines of his back. His long black hair hung loose, brushing against the beaded collarbone strap of his tribal jewelry. The firelight danced across the metal accents of his necklace, catching the tiny engraved designs that told his people's story. He was turning something over the flames, a flatbread, its edges crisping just right. "You're awake," he said, his voice deep, warm, and entirely calm. As though they'd shared mornings like this all their lives, Lena sat up slowly, clutching the thin blanket around her. "I didn't mean to sleep so late." "You needed it," he replied, still focused on the bread. "Today will be long." Something in his tone made her pause. "Why? What's happening today?" He turned then, holding the bread on a carved wooden plate, his dark eyes steady. "The council will speak about you." Her stomach tightened. "About me?" "Yes. Some believe you should be sent back." Others believe you should stay." Lena lowered her gaze, unsure what she even wanted. Her uncle's trade had been an insult, a humiliation, but here, despite her fear, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: safety. "They will want to see that you have been treated well," he added, as if reading her thoughts. She looked up sharply. "You've treated me like I mattered." His jaw flexed just slightly, and he set the plate down before her. "You do matter." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the muffled voices outside. Then he rose, taking a spear from the wall. The weapon was polished and wrapped in painted leather, with eagle feathers tied just below the tip. "Come," he said. She hesitated but stood, following him out into the sunlight. The village was alive now, children darting between lodges, women carrying baskets of berries, men returning from the early hunt with deer slung over their shoulders. Heads turned as they walked past, some faces warm and approving, others unreadable dot at the far end of the clearing. The elders sat in a half circle, draped in robes dyed deep with earth pigments. In the center, a fire burned, its smoke carrying the scent of cedar. The warrior led Lena forward, stopping just before the fire. One elder, his hair silver but his eyes sharp, spoke first. "We have heard much of this woman. Tell us, Creek warrior, why she is here." The warrior's voice was steady. "She was traded to me by a man who valued horses more than blood. But she is not property. She is under my protection." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. An elder woman leaned forward. "And does she accept this protection?" All eyes turned to Lena. Her throat felt tight, but the warrior's presence beside her was like a shield. "Yes," she said, her voice clear despite the tremor beneath it. "He has shown me more respect than my own kin. I would stay." The elders exchanged glances, their silence stretching long enough for the wind to carry the sound of distant drums. Finally, the silver-haired elder nodded. "Then it is decided. She will remain among us. But know this, your place here will be tested." The warrior inclined his head in acknowledgement, his jaw set with quiet determination. Lena's heart pounded not from fear this time, but from the realization that her fate had just shifted again, and in a way she hadn't dared hope for. As they turned to leave, the warrior's hand brushed lightly against hers. A silent promise. And for the first time since the day her uncle betrayed her, Lena felt like she belonged somewhere. The village was alive that morning, yet an air of reverent quiet lingered in the center where the great fire had burned through the night. The dawn's light painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, casting long shadows over the tribal grounds. The people gathered in a wide circle, their faces solemn yet full of pride. For this was not a day of mourning, it was a day of declaration. Ayanna stood at the center, her hair braided with eagle feathers gifted by the elders, each feather a symbol of honor. She wore a finely woven dress adorned with intricate beadwork colors telling the story of her arrival, her trials, and the bond she now shared with the warrior who had once been her captor. But in her heart, she knew the truth: he had never been her captor. He had been her shield, her guide, her anchor. Beside her stood Dakota, shirtless in the morning sun, his powerful frame glistening with the ceremonial paint that streaked across his chest and arms. His long black hair flowed like midnight silk over his shoulders, strands swaying in the gentle breeze. Around his neck hung tribal jewelry, bear claws, turquoise stones, and silver rings, each piece gifted by different clans as a sign of unity and respect. His expression was unreadable to outsiders, but Ayanna knew every flicker in his eyes. This was a man carrying the weight of his people and the fate of the woman beside him. The chief's voice broke the silence. "In the way of our ancestors, bonds are not forged by chains but by choice. And today, before the spirits of earth and sky, Before the eyes of our children and the wisdom of our elders, we recognize a union built not by bloodline but by courage and honor. Ayanna felt her pulse quicken as Dakota took her hand, his grip firm yet careful, as if holding something sacred. The warmth of his palm steadied her trembling. Though she tried to mask it, the elders stepped forward, each laying down an offering, a carved bow, a woven blanket, a pouch of rare herbs. These were not gifts for wealth, but for meaning. The bow symbolized protection, the blanket shelter, the herbs healing. Each one a promise from the tribe that she was now one of them. When it was Dakota's turn to speak, he turned to her fully. His voice was deep, steady, and carried to every ear in the gathering. When I first saw you, I saw fear in your eyes, but I also saw fire. You came from a world where your worth was measured in trade and gain, where your spirit was something to be taken, not cherished. I swore that day that no man would ever take it from you again, not even me. You are not mine because I claimed you. You are mine because you choose to stand beside me. The words struck her like an arrow, not in pain, but in truth. She thought of the night she arrived in his camp, broken and confused, unsure if she would survive the next day. She thought of the quiet meals by the fire, the way he had taught her to ride without fear, the countless moments he had shielded her from harm without ever asking for gratitude. And in that moment, she understood. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of a life she had never dared to dream. I choose you, she said softly, but her voice carried, steady and sure. Not because I must, but because no other place will ever feel like home if you are not in it. A collective murmur of approval rose from the crowd. The drums began to beat slowly, then faster, their rhythm matching the thrum of her own heart. Dakota placed a beaded necklace around her neck, the final act of the ceremony. Its pendant was a small carved hawk, wings spread wide. For freedom, he murmured so only she could hear. The crowd erupted in cheers as the drums thundered. Warriors stamped their feet, women sang in high, clear voices, children danced between them. The celebration swelled into laughter, music, and the scent of roasted game. Later, as the fire crackled under the starlit sky, Ayanna sat beside Dakota, leaning into the warmth of his side. She looked at the necklace, at the feathers in her hair, and then at him. You once told me that honor is not something you're given, she said. It's something you live. And so you will, he replied, his arm curling around her. As queen of my heart and of my people. Under the watch of the moon and the quiet blessing of the ancestors, the woman once traded like a possession was now a leader, a partner, and a symbol of unity between worlds. And in that sacred space, between earth and sky, she knew she had finally been set free.